All right, everyone, let's do this. I am Drew McManus, the author of Adaptistration, and this is my podcast, Shop Talk, where I invite captivating guests to talk about engaging topics connected to the orchestra business. And our first engaging guest is Bruce Kiesling. Active in a wide variety of music, Bruce Kiesling has a national profile as a conductor and music educator from coast to coast. From classical repertoire at Carnegie Hall to the stage of the Hollywood Bowl, conducting with Stevie Wonder and Latin superstars, Juanes and Gloria Estefan. His current music director positions include the Adrian Symphony in Michigan and the Sequoia Symphony Orchestra in California. He is also the artistic director and conductor of the School of Orchestral Studies at the New York Summer School of the Arts and conducts the orchestra and opera program at the University of California, Santa Cruz. With both of his professional orchestras, ticket sales and sponsorships have increased to record levels, and his concert comments and insider stories have become popular additions to programs. Bruce's programs show a particular affinity for American repertoire and include a huge range from live to picture film screenings to pop and rock. Hello, Bruce. Next up, we have Niccolo Go. Niccolo is a partner creative director at Go Creative Group. He's a collaborator at heart who looks after the client's needs and creates context that helps solve a problem, moves their business, and tells a compelling story. He is also a music lover and a season ticket holder at the Sequoia Symphony Orchestra. And hello, Niccolo.
Hi, Drew. Hi, Bruce. Nice to be here.
Am I getting your first name correct? I probably should have asked that before we even started.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Niccolo.
Niccolo, all right, good deal. Well, today we've got these two people on because we're talking about a topic that is extremely popular right now, which is all about production quality in video. It doesn't really matter if you're an individual artist or if you're an organization. You're both probably asking very similar questions right now. You know, it's one thing for somebody to say, go out and make a bunch of videos. Now you actually have to know what to do. And all the technical questions that come into this, from the equipment you have to use to how do you edit content, how do you get the sound right, and it doesn't take long to figure out why there's a whole fleet of people who are professionally trained in each of those individual tasks. Yet, as an organization, you have to figure all this stuff out or bring people in to help you with it. So that's kind of where we're going to set things up today. One of the reasons why I've got Bruce on in particular is for folks who don't already follow Bruce. He has a fabulous video podcast series at his website, bruceanthonykiesling.com. And what really stands out is not is it only engaging content, but the production values are like through the roof good. I mean, there's animation, there are graphics, it's edited. You know, it looks like something you want to engage with. You know, turn the volume down when you go watch it. And that's what really lets you know what you're starting to engage with. So Bruce, you know, give us kind of an overview of where you got into this, why you wanted to do it, and when did you decide that this was going to be your production quality benchmark?
Well, thanks again for having me on. So great to be here and talk with you about this, especially since it's relatively new that I started this kind of in the end of June, I guess, is when I first began this. And I'd been exploring the idea of doing something really to engage with my audiences, with the two orchestras that I work for. I don't live permanently in either of those communities. So with travel kind of shut off and our concerts essentially shut off, I really felt like I wasn't connecting with the people who were such supporters of the institutions that I loved and in many ways represented. And so I was looking for a way to do that, to just connect with people and to talk about the music that I loved. And I think as artists, we were all feeling, particularly performing artists, we're all feeling like this huge loss, like because we're not able to share our love of whatever our field is. In my case, you know, classical music and orchestral music, and specifically. So I had kind of thought, oh, I should do, you know, I kicked around some smaller ideas about what might be interesting. And then one day I was like, you know what, I'm just going to start one. And I did a little bit of research on some YouTube about how to start a series. And the best advice that I kept seeing all the time was just do it. Like, stop talking about it and just make some. And I appreciate the comments you had, certainly, about the production quality, but I will admit too that there was an enormous learning curve. And I've left those first 2 episodes up there because I've had this conversation with a couple of people informally, but the first episode was pretty rough. And I edited, I literally opened my laptop and hit record and just started talking to it and recommended a piece of music that people could listen to. And I found that by the second week, and I edited that in iMovie, I should say too. And by the second week, I already was up to things that iMovie couldn't do, the things that I wanted to be able to do with it. And so I thought, well, I need to find a new editing software. So I did some Googling around. I YouTubed what's the best editing software that has a decent learning curve. So episode 2 was so much better in terms of the production values and the kind of picture-in-picture things that I'm able to do. Eventually settled, in my case, on Premiere Pro. Although in Final Cut or Premiere Pro, you can pretty much do all the same things. It's kind of just 6 and 1/2 dozen. But I chose to go with that because I already had a subscription to Adobe, so it was essentially free. The other one was a couple $100, so that made the decision rather easy. And by the 3rd or 4th episode, I really think even in 4 weeks, you see what you can learn to do when you just start making videos. So I've left those up there because I want other people to see. The first one was a pretty rough, but by episode 4, is my first episode where I talked about pop songs that are based on classical music. So it's kind of a list, and I cut to different other orchestras playing the piece, and then the popular artist, and was able to do all of that pretty easily.
That's remarkably encouraging to hear. I think for folks because when you look at it, especially if they jump in towards the latter episodes, is to think that this was not something that's always has been. It took obviously time, and you started, from what it sounds like, really at ground zero and scratch. And I'll be kind of the bad guy in this scenario, and I'll say one of the problems that I have with content that's going out right now, whether it's from an artist or an organization, is they all have the same reasons that you mentioned, Bruce, where they need to fill this gap, they need to remain engaged, and they have to be creatives as well. But there's this shotgunning of content, which is, someone opens up their laptop and they just play something and they just put it out there and yay. But there's only so much of that you can take before you look at that and go, yeah, this is just not good. The playing's okay, but the sound is blah and the rest of it. And
yeah, totally. And I think we have 2 different things going on, which is one of the reasons that I suggested bringing Niccolo too, was that I think as my personal brand, as a conductor and a storyteller who talks about classical music, someone who sort of my brand sort of involves, I think, reaching out to people and bringing them into the experience. And I think we can do that for our personal brand and our personal stories in a way that's different from what we do institutionally. And I think we have to come to that with some different standards. And when we talked about doing live performances, which I do not do in my personal series, but the idea of doing a personal performance, I couldn't agree more. Like when we've talked about the streaming series that we have setting up with both the orchestras that I work for, we've said, you can't just turn on a camera in the back of the room and hope for the best. And that was okay for back in maybe March or April, but ultimately what we were putting out there did not represent the quality of music that people should expect when they come to our performances, and certainly not the permanent sort of, if you think, oh, I'm going to have this recording that will be available forever that is associated with our brand and our name. So I think, yes, I wanted to up the production value for my own series, but also when we approached the idea of doing it with the Sequoia Symphony Orchestra, okay, we knew right away that this has to be some of the best production value in terms of the music playing, everything. There's no room for errors. I have to approach it like we're making a great recording here and a great video. And what do those things have in common? And how are they totally different?
Well, and on that note, that's a perfect place to kind of segue into starting to chat with Niccolo, who's going to be more of the the boots on the ground expert with this, because I reached out to Bruce first about this episode, putting together the idea. And, when I asked him who he wanted to have on the episode with him, it was right away, yeah, I want Niccolo to be on this. And, he's the guy who's going to have the input, the advice that we're going to, that viewers are actually going to want to listen to and process. So with that as kind of the setup, Niccolo, no pressure whatsoever.
No pressure. First of all, I want to say Bruce, I think, has a third or fourth career being a YouTuber, because he's really good at it. And I was watching your latest episode where you were cutting the music, and then you showed the chair. It's hilarious. I have the same problem. I won't show you because I'm too embarrassed. But the arms on my chair are completely naked. They have no cushion on them, so I can totally appreciate your office problem.
Standing desks.
Yeah, I need one of those. I need one. Yeah, I'm gonna get one. Let me start with YouTubing and live streaming. I think you're right. A lot of times people do want to just go ahead and begin. And whether it's utilizing their iPhone or Android phone is a great start. But especially when you're talking about music, you definitely want to up the production value when it comes to audio capture. So there are definitely great microphones that one can utilize that you can then use in conjunction with your iPhone or whatever type of webcam that you may be using if you are going to do live streaming with music. And there's many resources on YouTube. If you just Google the search term like how to live stream orchestral music or acoustic music, and there's really a plethora of resources that you can find to learn it, as was Bruce's experience in terms of trying to learn how to do this. He went ahead and jumped into Adobe Premiere, which is a great platform. We use it to edit our products, and I'm sure you too, Drew, probably use the same platform. And I think it's just the willingness to learn some of this tool set, because there is so much out there that you can utilize, both from a gear perspective and editing perspective, lighting, audio. There's so much to pick from, but I think one of the advantages we have today is definitely Amazon. Amazon is a complete, godsend for any new content makers on YouTube, just because you can look up equipment, anything from cameras, from webcams to DSLRs, audio equipment, and everything else that lets you mix audio, for example, and all the cords you might need and lighting. And I mean, even as, experts in the field, we still utilize a lot of the same tools that a YouTube content maker might utilize, like my podcasting mic, like I said, or the patch to my iPhone to make it into webcam, were all things that you Googled. So if you have a specific problem, like, hey, how do I turn my iPhone into a webcam? Put that into the Google, and within your first 3 searches, you're going to have a solution that's even suggested, recommended, some for free, some you pay for. In this case, the patch to the iPhone to make it into a webcam is only $8. So amazing kind of tool set that Amazon and really review sites and a lot of tech sites can actually give you, and they give you lists like top 10 cameras to use for live streaming. So you can really take advantage of that. And to kind of bring that home a little bit, while we were recording for Sequoia Symphony, the cellist that we've come to know, and unfortunately his home was devastated in the fires here in California. And so he sends me an email, because we had exchanged information. And he says, hey, this is what happened, but we want to explore, new ways to reach out to people via YouTube. And do you have any suggestions for cameras I can use, etc.? So immediately I went into, let me write him up a prescription, so to speak, and looking at different resources to go to. Because he and his wife, who are both musicians, want to start doing Zoom and YouTubing. and you know, reaching out to their community during this really difficult time. And so the technology has really given us an extension and a way to be connected like this, even through pandemic.
Write a prescription. I like that. That's a good way to look at it. Because I think for a lot of folks, just getting that little bit of a head start. Because even when you do, I know from my own experience, when you just go in and start doing some Google search researching, I mean, it is a little bit like drinking from a fire hydrant. And there is so much content that comes in, and there is some of it that is so much more jargon heavy than other. It is a learning curve. You know, Bruce, one thing you mentioned about settling on Adobe, which is the platform that I use as well, is I've been using it for long enough, many years before it became Creative Cloud. And the things that have improved considerably are kind of the out of the box presets and a lot of the aftermarket things that you can purchase to help improve production quality considerably. When you were putting your series together, are you taking advantage of any of that, or is everything that you have, Bruce, something that you've done like bit by bit for the animations?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would begin by saying I would just endorse everything Niccolo said. I did all of that. Like, I went from opening the laptop to my next one I shot with my iPhone, to the next one I shot with a camera. And then my son had been saving up for a little bit of a nicer camera, and I knew he was doing that. So I said, hey, well, what if I loan you the other half? And then I've been using that camera since then. He's paid it back. He's paid it off. So by the way, but in that time, but it's just kind of, you make it work. And that's exactly how I figured out how to do everything that I've done in terms of graphics, any of that. I just Googled, hey, if it was something I needed to know how to do, I was like, how do I do this in Premiere Pro? And there is some YouTuber, and I have identified a couple of people who teach really well, and they teach at the speed that I need to learn. You know, it's not super fast, but it's also not really slow. Like, I need someone in a sweet spot in the middle. And I tend to go to those 2 or 3 people all the time. And I can find, they have thousands of videos out there explaining every different little facet of it. And so when I do a search, usually those people pop up and I'll be like, oh, it's that person. I'm going to go there because I know that they go at my speed. Pretty much, to answer your question, pretty much everything I create from scratch. I buy some vector graphics that then I animate. I have a little membership to a website called 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐿, and you can just like Google Apple. Like, the one I'm marrying tomorrow is going to upload. I needed a little apple tree, so I Googled apple tree, and I was able to get one and keep the parts I wanted. And I did a little bit of animation. So I got a tree and I got one apple, and I kind of did a thing with animation. And even like the opening spread that I have, I did use a preset. The letters kind of pop in and then they pop out. That was a preset that I used. But all the graphics behind it, I was able to design that myself. That was sort of the first ambitious project. If you watch, I have this sort of opening sequence where it's a couple pictures of me conducting with some music and all of that. See, now I know enough that I could probably do that in about an hour and a half, but it probably took me 4 days. And not full time, but like, I just kept messing with it because it was really early on that I built that, but I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew kind of what I wanted to look like. So there are presets in there, and I've used those handful of things in general. But most of because I really want it to look the way I want it to look, which I think has a certain sort of down home, homemade quality. I don't want it to look too processed. And the fact is, I literally do it all myself. So I've edited everything. I do all the letter, so I don't want it to look I want it to look like a real person did it. In my case, for my personal thing, different from what we're doing with the symphony.
And as someone who uses After Effects, aftermarket stuff that I'll just buy and pop in, yeah, that is very ballsy of you.
Well, I will say too, almost everything I've done in Premiere, because I thought, oh, I'm going to learn After Effects. That, speaking of drinking from a fire hydrant, After Effects is an incredible program, but it's been. It can do anything. If you can dream it, After Effects can do it if you know what you're doing. But I'm not quite there yet. So maybe next year, if we have a follow-up on this, we can talk about that.
Well,
I know when I started watching Bruce's content on YouTube, I was really impressed, and I thought he had actually hired somebody to do it. I'm like, oh
yeah,
man, he
I
must
did
have
too.
gotten a content creator to help him, because I'm like, I don't think he has time to do this. So I'm sure he must have hired, maybe it's his son doing it, or maybe he got, there's so many content creators in Los Angeles. I'm like, he must have gotten somebody to help him with some of this content management, because I'm like, I don't know if he has like weeks to learn this stuff, but I'm really impressed to hear that you learned it, and you've basically got this new craft that you know how to deal with now, which I think is amazing. And it may have to do with the fact that you're already a creative person. You understand aesthetics, you understand pattern recognition, and after watching a few other YouTube videos, you probably got a handle on, I think this is what I want it to look like and sound like, and this is this is what the things that I want to talk about. So I think being a creative person really helped you, and being involved in cinema too really helped you kind of dive into it fearlessly.
Well, and
Probably. I
point,
mean, I was just going to say that I agree with that to a certain degree. The pandemic gave me weeks to really focus on it in a way that nothing else
Right.
would. And I would also say too that I had done audio editing, and I think because of just being familiar with what a timeline, how that works in an audio interface, I think that the timeline in film is very similar. So I think that was a relatively quick adaptation. I interrupted you, Drew. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, we've been talking quite a bit about kind of the individual creator, individual artist perspective of all of this. But that also extends from what I'm seeing inside arts organizations to the marketing director's desk or the comms director. Or, someone inside that structure is now being ostensibly tasked with learning similar sorts of skills and then implementing them on an institutional level with these small projects. One thing that I am personally hoping that we see coming out of the COVID era is that groups don't abandon this and that they continue this effort, because there is real value in using these smaller bits of personalized, what I like to call empathy-driven content, to help engage with their patron base in a different way. Now, to that end, I'm putting my administrator hat on and I'm thinking about, if you're an executive and you need to hire a marketing director or anyone that's going to be in that same sort of departmental level, you probably know nothing as an executive about what the skill sets and requirements should be for someone like that. Most of them probably don't even know what Creative Cloud is. Niccolo, what would be like a bullet list, a quick bullet list of some things that an organization would want to ask about to make sure that an incoming marketing director or communications director would have as far as a skill set to handle these sorts of tasks?
Definitely an important question. Especially in the classical music realm, where the audience tends to skew much older, a lot of the the direction around media has been slow to adapt. Just because, hey, our audience really isn't there. They're not on YouTube. They're not on Facebook, etc. So because of the pandemic, organizations have really had to take a crash course into like, wait a minute, now I do have to get involved in media. And it is important to vet the people that you are going to partner with. And indeed, it is a partnership. As you mentioned in the introduction, I've been a symphony goer for about 4 to 5 seasons now, and I really use it as my own personal learning concert, and thankfully Bruce is an excellent teacher. So I'm always learning something at every concert, and I'm not, full disclosure, I'm not even a classical music fan per se, but what I do appreciate is art and virtuosity and just music. So I'm learning, and I'm enriching myself. So this is to say, I've always had a relationship with a symphony, and we have this beautiful community here that's very close. And I've gotten to learn Bruce and the executive director. So we've had a relationship for some time. So one of the bullet points is really about, does your organization's culture match that of the production company or the agency that you're going to hire? And that doesn't come from just interviewing them about the kind of work that they do. So this is something you may have to actually take some time in order for you to witness some of it. So that may mean like visiting them more than once, not only looking at their work, but looking at how they work and how they communicate with you and kind of set the milestone for your particular project. So I think that's probably one of the most important key points is like, does their culture fit your culture as an organization? And then I would say number two, oh, this should be number one on that list, is what is the level of investment? A lot of times when you approach a production company or an agency and you don't have an idea yet what your investment is, you should definitely go back to your board and the stakeholders of your you know, your company and your organization, and think, you know, hard and long about, hey, what type of investment do we want to put into you know, social media and creating content for YouTube and these other different platforms, knowing that you need to capture new audiences more and more today, you know, from all across the board, and especially towards the younger part of the age scale. So what is your investment? And for every organization, that's going to be a little bit different. You know, the Sequoia Symphony compared to the New York Phil or, you know, San Francisco is going to be quite different. So that discussion is important. What is the investment? Secondly, look at the work of the production company, and do you like what they do? You know, both from an aesthetic standpoint, but also have they done similar work that you're looking for them to make? You know, have they done this kind of thing before? In the case of the Sequoia Symphony and us, you know, even before this particular engagement, we had done small vignettes for them in the past, and some of it was for, you know, pro bono. You know, we wanted to contribute to the arts in our own community, so there was already an established relationship. So I think we were lucky in that way. But definitely look at the work of the production company and see if it's something that you like. And then thirdly, meet the people that are part of it, the managers, the directors, and the producers, you know, and see if they're the people that will care about your organization and this project. The instruments and the tools do matter, the gear, the cameras, the audio equipment, the lighting. But if you gave me a Steinway, there is no way I could be a concert pianist. You know, or if, you know, you could put a Stradivarius right here in front of me and I would have no clue how to use it. So what's really important are the talents behind those types of gear. They are definitely important, but they are just like the instruments that you know, the orchestra plays. It's quite dependent on the player and the person that's wielding that equipment. So definitely, you know, vet those people. Do they have a match for your organization, and do they care about your particular project? And I think that's especially important in the arts because you know, the level of passion and energy you bring to a project is quite important to the ultimate outcome. So so what are some additional questions you might ask you know, this particular person now that you've met them? So how does their creative development work? You know, is it a discussion? Is it a collaboration? Or is it something that they kind of like just think about, you know, unilaterally? And it's definitely important to be a partner. And I think the relationship we've had with Sequoia Symphony has been amazing, just because, you know, as a concert goer, as part of the community, I've already been engaged with both Bruce and Josh and, you know, the musicians in the past. So it felt comfortable, and it felt like I also had a stake in my community orchestra. Second, what does their production cycle look like? From creative development all the way to delivery. You know, what does that look like? Where do I have a chance to give my feedback? And what does a turnaround look like? All very important. Third, and some people may not even think of this, is what does the production company's organization expect of our organization as the symphony? It is definitely a team effort. So at some degree, there's going to be something from your organization as an orchestra that you're going to need to provide that production company. And both in time and readiness, like in Bruce's case, you know, he wrote us up a whole, you know, timing chart basically, and showed us where different solos would be, where the most important parts of the pieces would be. And it really gave us, you know, all of these kind of milestones to look for while we were in production. And my last point was really, does that fit? And I kind of mentioned it up top, but I think it's such an important part of the process, is that organization's people and culture fit with your organization. Because if you're just going to be another, you know, project out of many, and they're not particularly passionate about that, I think it's difficult when we're doing artistic endeavors and the people don't really care about your project. It may be one thing to be selling, like, you know, a doodad, but it's quite different when we're talking about an artistic endeavor. And, you know, Bruce and Josh have been like just amazing collaborators and creative thinkers, and also giving us, like, you know, kind of like a loose leash, so to speak, to be creative on our end so that they can be creative on their end. But the conversation has been amazing. So I think that's definitely an important thing to look for, is a match in culture. I hope that wasn't too much.
I think that was a terrific list. And actually, as a provider, you took the immediate perspective that I would have taken as another provider on this, which is an organization that's looking to actually engage with someone if they're fortunate enough to have a budget and to be able to actually put something larger together. I do want to circle back to the original framework of that, which is, let's say an organization is now going to commit to creating content like the type Bruce creates, or that's on an individual level, where they're not going to necessarily use an agency, but they're going to use internal human resources for that. That's the part that I think a lot of groups are going to have difficulty wrapping their head around, starting to know what sorts of skill sets a professional should have to be able to produce something that's, you know, close to or similar to the level that Bruce's content comes out on. Did you have any thoughts about that?
Well, and just before Nico jumps in, I think we've all seen some very, very large organizations releasing some videos of their music directors and executive directors. And I am stunned at the production qualities that you see, or
Yes.
obvious green screens that look, and you're like, wait, really?
Really?
So yeah, I'm really, really curious what Niccolo has to say, because I think that's a really, really important point.
Yes, thank you.
You know, there's a company called Wistia, WISTIA, and it's a link that Drew, you'll include in the show notes. And they're a video marketing company, and the resources that they have really run the gamut from like podcasting all the way to high budget production. And you know, they also specialize in like video statistics and kind of like responsiveness. So that's kind of like their main product. But the content that they have around how to make content is excellent. So one of my recommendations to these types of organizations that may need to, you know, take it in-house is, you know, look to leaders like them, look at their content, so that you really get a feel for the types of skill sets you're going to need to farm yourself by learning it and utilizing it within your organizations. And then also identifying the person that's going to be most suitable for that. You know, you know, we're always like, hey, you know what, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and let's just go and do it and like learn something. And that's all well and good if it's within your wheelhouse, or if you're already kind of leaning in those directions. If you're already a creative person, if you're already have some, you know, artistic leanings, or maybe you're one that has always been curious about the creative side of yourself. But if you're, let's say, an executive director, or, you know, you play a role within the administration of a symphony, I think identifying that person who is already engaged in those things, maybe you have somebody who is already a YouTuber, a content creator, an Instagrammer, and perhaps utilize them potentially to kind of grow that practice.
I think too, just to add to that, I think the audio portion, doing live concerts is what we're good at.
Yeah.
But when you talk about adapting those for these other mediums, one of the things that the buzzwords I keep saying about our series with the Sequoia Symphony is that we are designing the series with the way it will be consumed in mind, because we think no one's going to sit and watch an hour concert on their phone. Like, that's just not going to happen. So what does the length need to be? What do we need to adjust about that? What do we need to adjust about production values? They're making a film is a completely different thing than making a concert. And, I joked with the musicians a little bit, because we did 3 hours of shooting on maybe 8 or 9 minutes of music, and we did certain sections over and over and over again. And they were like, oh my gosh, again. And they were great sports about it. We were kind of laughing about it. I said, see, all those movies that have those actors pretending to play the string quartet in the background, that's because no musician would sit there for 16 hours and they couldn't afford musicians' rates for 16 hours either. So an extra rate is so much easier to pay. But I do think this is an opportunity, like for me personally, during the pandemic in April and May, when I was sort of getting the skill set up and running, because not a lot else was going on. Right now, institutionally, so few of us are overwhelmed with our normal, we have a concert in 4 days, which was basically the endless cycle. And we had gotten really good at that wheel. Like we really knew how to do what we know how to do. But right now, because that wheel is not spinning, I think there is an opportunity to learn some of this, and that we as institutions need to take advantage of that and learn how to do it. And you made this point earlier, Drew, what will happen? What will happen afterward? Are we just getting through this? Because I know some institutions are just like, we just need to get through this until we can go back to doing what we always did. Or what can we learn now? And certainly with Niccolo and our executive director, Josh, as well as with my executive director in Michigan, Libby, we're thinking definitely, well, what can we learn to do during this time that we can then adapt to feed into our live events? How can they complement those? How can they advertise for those? And maybe not like, let's do a commercial, but can we tease things? We don't know the answers to those yet, but we really want to be thinking about that now, because we're gonna basically, our skill set can hugely grow during this time. And the important thing, I think, will be how can we apply this when we're able to actually do that old wheel too, because there's tremendous opportunity there, I think.
Well, and on that point, you mentioned too, Bruce and Niccolo, something that I was going to bring up, and you both beat me to the punch on this, which is video production, especially for the smaller kind of content that we're talking about that isn't even necessarily concert driven. The skill sets to produce something that look really good is kind of like the cult Peacemaker, back in the day. It levels the playing field for everybody. Because yes, I have also seen content that have come out from the biggest budget of organizations. I look at it and think, oh my God, that really sucks. I mean, that's just not good. It's amateurish. They just sat some people down at a table that they had in the conference room, and no, there's nothing engaging about it. And then I see content that gets turned around by groups that have a fraction of a budget of that larger group that is so much better, and it's so much more engaging. And all of a sudden, everyone in the field is even. And they all have the ability to begin to do everything now you just said, Bruce, which is to learn to engage with their audience in a new way. And what's kind of breaking my heart already is when I see groups that are really just sort of entrenching themselves and buying their time literally until they get back to regular concert production. Because you can just see them they just can't get this stuff off their shoulders fast enough. And they want to get back to what they already knew, instead of taking the opportunity of being able to reapproach how you actually engage with the people you're supposed to be engaging with to begin with.
Yeah, and I think there's a learning curve too, it seems like a lot now. When I started doing mine, like it would take me days, and now I pretty much shoot and edit my things within 1 day. Like I shoot it in the morning and I edit it and it's usually ready to go by the end of the night. That institutionally we can do that too. It seems like really heavy lifting now, that's taking all of this capacity. But we would get better at it and be able to devote capacity in a way that would make it manageable as part of what we do. I interrupted you, Niccolo. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries, no worries. And it's vital to really capturing audiences, as the current, we'll call it the current kind of like concert goer profile as they age. And remember, even those folks are sophisticated. Even the folks that we think are like 50 and over, 65 and over, at least for our symphony, which kind of like comprises, let's say, the regular concert goer, they're also on digital platforms now. And as we grow that audience into a younger base, everyone is on a digital media. I mean, look what we're doing today. We're on a Zoom call talking about orchestras. And we're going to be, publishing this into the interwebs. So it's absolutely vital. And you're right, Bruce. I think this time was a perfect time. However, tragic it may have been, but it was a great time for organizations to, really learn a new set of skills, but also learn almost like a new way of reaching new audiences. And it's completely vital. The internet, our phones, the web is not going away. It hasn't gone away since '94 or whenever it broke loose. And it continues to evolve and become a greater part of our lives. So it has been a good opportunity to kind of pivot and learn new skill sets. And it's not going to be, amazing off the jump, as you mentioned. But, learning all of these things now is going to be so vital in the long term.
Well, I hope it also starts to change, and I'm kind of talking to Bruce directly here on this one because he's in the field as well, and we know what the insider view of this is, which is valuation for your employees, regardless if it's a music director or an individual musician or someone in the office. Niccolo, you mentioned one of the things that you recommended that decision makers do inside an organization is begin to identify who, my cat decided to wake up, who is going to be someone who possesses the value skill set to be able to start to produce this kind of stuff. And Bruce, in your case, you're a music director, and it's not like there aren't 3,000 people after one job to begin with already. Now, if I'm looking at you and you've applied at this orchestra and you've had your trial and everything's great and everyone loves you, and there's someone else who's on that exact same level who doesn't even know how to operate their phone.
I hadn't thought about that. I'm certainly much more marketable than I thought. No, but I work for very small orchestras in small markets too, where we don't have staffs of dozens of people. Yeah. So I think there's been a responsibility for all of us in these smaller markets. It's like if we don't do it, no one will. And so it is an opportunity, I think, for us to define. I love that you call it the great equalizer. I'd never even thought about it in those terms. That's really powerful because you're right. Some smaller organizations are doing some really high content work that will speak for them for a long time if you have something that really looks great. And I think there was so much focus on, maybe 10 years ago, like we need to get recordings, and then orchestras found out nobody makes any money from recordings. It's just like all it is a vanity project. And that doesn't necessarily mean never do them, but that we have to be really realistic about their value. And the one thing we haven't talked about here too much yet is the monetization piece of it, and how we institutionally look at monetization. And if we're doing this, are we selling tickets to it? We see lots of different models. With the Sequoia Symphony, we're giving ours out for free. With the Adrian Symphony, we're doing a subscription series, and I think we see lots of different models. But I think hopefully, as you said, that orchestras, we can start to see the monetization and the value of doing stuff like this over the long term, which then helps to carve out a skill set that we know we need at whatever size our staff is, whether there's 12 or 50 people in the admin of it. Who is the person who's going to be doing that? And if we want to remain vital, which we talk about so much, but then when it actually comes time to change, we're all like, can't we just do what we always do? And I mean, I've been in, even with my own orchestras, we've been in that conversation where we think all these great ideas, and then we kind of talk ourselves back if we're not careful, And we say, well, let's just kind of wait and see and do what we always do. When can we get back to that? Because that's just easy. And this is not easy right now. But I think, again, incredible opportunity, as you say.
And I do hope it gets more attention on a national level of groups getting recognized to reward that internal risk that they are really taking, because it isn't the comfortable thing to do. And on that point, I think we've kind of reached a good ending spot here. I will absolutely say this is going to be one of the most resource heavy episodes that we've got. So folks watching this, be absolutely sure to check out all the stuff below. And if you're at the blog post, you'll be there as well. And you can get the full bios for both of our fabulous guests today. And gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time out on a Saturday afternoon to come in, a Sunday afternoon to come in and chat.
It was our pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Drew, thanks for having us.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Especially since we're in the art of making musical performance. Did we lose Drew?
I think we lost Drew.
We
Which
lost
seems
Drew.
odd because isn't he the host?
Oh, we're back.
Hey, you're back.
Oh my
Hey.
God. Yeah, just this building has never lost internet connection. And
Until today.